So we're going to pretend like, well, it doesn't matter. We've been going through a lot of technical difficulties. Randy's been so graceful to kind of hang out with us. I apparently has nothing better to do. But yeah, so we have Mr. Randy Noah all the way from Texas, where the sun is still shining and the stars at night are big and bright. We usually have fake claps in here, but we'll add that in later. Randy, thank you for joining us and thank you for being patient this evening. Let's just start off by go ahead, I usually tell people kind of introduce yourself, how long you've been drifting, what got you into drifting, just kind of give us a little spiel about yourself.
I'm Randy Noah. I'm 29 years old. I've been drifting for it's over a decade. I think it's about 12, 13 years now. I initially got into this because of my brother and like Forza Motorsports and Xbox and trying to play video games. And we kind of like built the whole we like racing thing and then slowly actually introduced into cars. So that's kind of where the bug bit me, was because of my brother.
Okay. So those are the people that know you, they know your car, right? And they know the Breathe Free logo on it. And they know, most of the people that know you already know the story behind the car. Can you give us a little more, those people that maybe have never met you before, or just seeing you for the first time, a little bit more in depth on what inspired that build?
Okay, so the car that you guys see me drive primarily is the purple S14. The purple S14 came about probably when I was about 17 years old, 16 years old. My brother traded his Ford Focus for a stock, like, project S14. And he, like, slowly but gradually started to do little changes to it. He started to do, like, fenders and just cleaning it up, trying to make it look nice. And unfortunately, in 2014, he passed away. So the build kind of came to a halt a little bit before that, and it was always the intention to kind of get the car to where he wanted it or where he envisioned it. And at that point in time is kind of when when I decided that, okay, it's really time to execute this and make it happen, because now it's kind of a memorial thing and it's following through with his wishes. So the build began as a RB20, kind of a daily setup. So I took the engine out of my personal S14 and put it into his car. Then I started drifting it a little bit and trying to do like little fun events and just kind of progressively building the car as it went. And just over time, it's just become to what it is now. But it was the car that my brother and I learned how to drive manual in. It was our first drifting experience. We got to meet a whole bunch of friends that basically led to where we are now. Introduced us into, not that it's good to say, street drifting. Street drifting was a real big thing back then, but we got into street drifting and going into warehouses and hanging out with friends and just having a good time all together. And that kind of transpired to me growing to where I am now. It's just been a surrounding myself with people with like minds and just kind of the right mindsets.
I remember, I think when I first started like really like trying to watch you when you drive is when you were just constantly trying to do the 360 entries at PBIR. That was like the biggest. Is like every time he's trying to go, it's like, who is that? I was Randy. I was like, oh, okay, Randy. But I think that was something that a lot of people remember about you. At least when I talk to people, they always remember you at PBIR.
Yeah, the 360s was kind of me trying to have fun, experiment, and like try and reach the next level that I wasn't at before. And 360s, I think at that time wasn't a very common thing. Yeah, like now it's like if you do a 360, it's kind of like, they're like, there goes that guy. But the first time I did it, I was like, okay, this is really cool, because like I would do it so it like linked into the turn, or I'd like try and make it as fluent as possible without looking like, trying to survive, make it through the turn.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was my.
I think one time, I don't know, maybe I'm thinking it wrong. You tried to do like 260W 720. I could have sworn that's.
Oh yeah. I mean, everyone at that time was like, "Oh, 360, sick," and like everyone would talk about it for a little bit, and then I was like, I'm gonna try and go a little bit more. So I would try and go even faster and just really just try and keep it going because like it started making sense, and like it was just me building car control ultimately. But
Yeah. What do you think?
yeah, 720. That was in
You
there.
just
I
got to
never
learn
got
how
it.
to like do 360s all the way around the whole entire track.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Hey, so let me ask you something. What was your first competition?
My first competition was actually, so it wasn't an official. It wasn't like a real big thing. It was Chris Jackson's event at.
Was it at the USDC at
man.
the stadium, or was it at the okay.
Yes, it was at the stadium. It was at the stadium. I think the same event where it got rained out at night for
Yeah.
the tandem side. So I was in the solo class.
Okay. Right.
Because I didn't have
yeah,
kids.
yeah, because he would do two competitions at the same time. Okay. So did you think that doing that first competition was walking away from the first competition, did you leave that competition thinking, listen, I got to get a cage, I want to get more serious into it, or was just kind of like, I'm gonna do this for fun and just whatever?
I think at that time I was still in the having fun mindset. I was driving with like kind of because it was a solo class, I was driving with the amateur division. So it was more like people like me. So, I drove and I did my best, and I didn't like feel like I was like getting really stressed out. I was just out there having fun, doing my best. And I think in that event I got second. I got second in that event. And yeah, I got second on that event. And Gabe Morales, with the automatic BMW, he ended up taking first. I would have technically got the win for first place on that one, because on his run when he was going to go, his car shut off. But because I don't like to win by technicality or anything like that, I told them to allow him to do a rerun. Then he did his run, and he ended up doing a better run than I did. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Let me because when you said technicality, and I was going to get your opinion on something else, but maybe I'll push that off for what the heck. Yeah, so speaking of technicalities, what do you think about the whole Chelsea Denofa and Stuke thing that happened with the hood bobbling, and it was technically trying to they forced him to go around one more time, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
So like I understand both perspectives, but from a personal standpoint, I wouldn't be the one to protest a call like that. That's like, so in Klutch Kickers, one of the real big things was panel opening as well, and at one point they started getting to the point where it was like if your gas cap opens, you get a 0. So I had to I had to duct tape my cap to to make sure it would stay shut, and my trunk to make sure it was shut. I did everything I could to make sure it was gonna work, even though it worked. But I feel like if I was in the same situation and 10K is on the line and a gas cap opens up in Klutch Kickers, I'm not gonna try and win a protest because of that situation. Right. Even though I've done everything I can on my side to make sure it's all good, shit happens, and I'm not going to try and win on a call like that. Something so.
Yeah. There's a word for that. Chelsea used quite a few times in that video, but
I like straight up battles. Yeah. I like straight up battles. If I fly off track, it is what it is. But if my gas cap opened up and it got protested, I'm gonna be like, on the trailer.
I could see that. All right, so enough about that. So now coming up to, did you do any big competitions before Klutch Kickers?
Honestly, it was only really the U.S. Drift Circuit stuff that I was involved in. Klutch Kickers was my first competition that I drove that actually had more weight to it.
Yeah, because when you came up to Klutch Kickers, it was like it's still my favorite battle of all-time Klutch Kickers is you versus Alec. That's still my like all-time favorite battle.
That was,
Looking back at Klutch Kickers, huh?
that was. No, I'm saying that. I think that was.
Yeah, it was season 2. Yeah,
I think. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
looking back at Klutch Kickers, what do you think you learned from Klutch Kickers? Unfortunately, it's not around anymore. But what do you think that did for you as a driver?
So the first time I went out there, I kind of went with the open mindset of, let's see what we got, let's see what we can do, and it really opened my eyes to kind of the competition mindset, where everything is you're forced to drive at a higher level than what you're capable of in some instances. You're not going to just have an easy path all the way to the top. So in the first actual competition that I drove at Klutch Kickers, I ended up beating my top 64. I think I qualified like number 40 or something. I qualified really low. And then I ended up beating my first 64 battle. And my 32 battle was going to be Mike Pollard. And you know how Mike Pollard was. And I had known him for years. I had known of him for years. So I knew he was, kind of like David and Goliath kind of thing. I knew he was something that was not going to be an easy battle for me. So that forced me to push harder than I ever had before. And ultimately, me finding a new boundary within my driving. So every bit of competition that I did improved in me, like mentally or just finding my limits.
Yeah, we saw a huge difference from when you first started at Klutch Kickers, and then just working your way through, and it was very exciting to watch. And especially, we're of course rooting for you because originally you were from West Palm, now you're living in Texas. Was he part of that?
Yep.
West Palm? You're banned West Palm Beach.
Yeah.
That was part of that career.
Yeah, I was.
I still don't know why.
Yep.
I still don't know why. So he left West Palm Beach because he didn't want to be banned anymore.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a long story. Okay. All
Yeah,
right. We'll let that. We'll leave that alone. So anyhow, you definitely gained a lot of experience in Klutch Kickers. Like you said, it pushed you further as a driver. What did you learn? Driving is one thing, but there's so much more than just driving. Were you, or are you still trying to develop a program for yourself?
Yeah. So ultimately, right now, I'm in the position to try and keep growing, but I'm also trying to get a path that makes sense where I'm not burying myself in a hole financially. Like I need to do a couple of things before I focus back on it. So I'm trying to do a couple of grassroots events and not push so much for competition because it's not local anymore. Now I'm trying to, even though the Pro-Am is local now, it's kind of one of those things where it's a big financial aspect. So I'm kind of in the building stage to get to that point. So that's why this whole move happened, and that's why I'm in this position now to try and grow to be in a better position for the future. Because I've always dreamt of I want to do competition drifting or just be able to go where I see all my friends go, just across the U.S., drifting different tracks, or fly over to Japan and drive in Japan. Just I want to be able to do that, and that's what I'm aiming to do.
Yeah, I want to live that drifting dream. So are you still driving the S14? Because I know you did make a switch over to the E46, which I want to talk about in a minute. But did you bring that car over there with you, or is that still over? Is that over here?
So the S14 is still in Florida.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you just set E46.
The E46 is in Florida as well. That's with Charles.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have nothing here. I have just the sim, which is over there. So I'm just in an apartment right now. So this, like I said, this is me building to try and get into a better future to make everything more feasible. Yeah, the 240 is still in Florida, and the BMW is with Charles. So the BMW is basically both of our car, but it's his car. You know what I mean?
Okay.
We both drive it. We built it with the intention of me doing competition in it. So that's why the third season of Klutch Kickers, I was driving it, and it was still in that building aspect, so it was pure chaos.
Mm-hmm.
But Yeah, it's that was the purpose for me to have a competition car without putting the S14 at risk.
So what prompted the choice of going to? So you chose a different power plant than most would probably have chosen, and I'm sure that came with some challenges. So what is the actual motor you decided to put in there, and why?
So the engine is a VR6 out of a Volkswagen GT or Volkswagen R32. It's probably one of the most known ones. It's 6-cylinder, very compact, good displacement, a lot of aftermarket support on the drag racing side, not so much on the drifting side. So there was a person who basically ran that engine in an S14 as a drag car. And so he made an adapter plate for a CDO9. So when that happened, that kind of opened the possibility for creating a drift car with the CDO9 and using that platform. Charles saw that opportunity since he's a Volkswagen guy or Euro kind of Volkswagen just in general. He had parts already and kind of had an arsenal of components, and we just built from that and kept going and ended up with the VR6.
Okay. So there was some incentive there because you had somebody with the knowledge of the motor and some parts. What do you think the biggest challenge with that engine has been for you guys?
Honestly, the engine's been great. The first rendition, so the engine was built to the car, and this was a engine that doesn't come dry sump. It comes with an oil pump that sits on the bottom of the engine, and with the like rear-wheel drive configuration, that meant the oil pump is going to interfere with the crosswind. So we had to do a dry sump setup, and we had to do a lot of custom fabrication to make it work in the car. But that being said, after the fabrication part was done, we had low oil pressure. That was due to a oversight in the oiling passages due to the dry sump. We're deleting a lot of the OEM components, so we had to go and figure out where it was being lost within the engine, and we ended up finding it and revising that in the version 2 of the engine. But mechanically speaking, the engine itself is strong, and there's nothing that it can't handle for the most part from a stock perspective. It's almost like a Volkswagen JZ.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of capability, and you can see it all day in the front-wheel drive drag racing communities.
Okay. So how about now? So you got different power plant working through that bugs, but now you're also changing to a whole different chassis. How is it going from the S14 to the E46?
So the initial setup was a coilover that was not set up right. It was like what would in a divorce or a coil over setup on a BMW. Normally BMW uses the divorce setup, so you have the spring and bucket, and you have the shock separate. We went with a true coilover setup, and that basically meant going with a higher value or a lower value. And when we ended up putting it on the car, it was almost like on pogo sticks. So it didn't really make sense. So the first time I drove it, we drove it with this setup as is because we were building the car all the way up to the first event that we drove it. And our first lap on the car was at the track during practice. So that was insanity. But for the most part, the car felt good. It felt actually better than the S14 because we took a lot of information that we had learned from the past, from either the 240 or the BMW, or from building the 240 and just over time, things that we've experienced and seen other people do, and applied it to our car. And so the BMW was ultimately a final product of experience.
Okay, I'm going to take competition aside, right? Okay, but if I got 4 different drifting techniques, I guess you can call them. If you had to eliminate one of these techniques and you were not allowed to use them anymore, out of these 4, which one would it be? Would it be get rid of the e-brake. No more clutch kicking. No left foot braking. And wait, what was the last one? Oh, you have to run with tire pressure. So like if it says 40 on the tire, you got to run 40 on the tire.
That's a weird one.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying, if you had to drop, if you weren't allowed to do one of those 4,
well, the tire one would be the one you would do.
You would keep that?
Yeah.
I would eliminate
I don't know.
the tire.
Well, let him answer.
Because I mean, 40 psi on tires kind of sucks, especially. Well, actually, yeah, including competition. There you go. Because that's major in competition. You're either not allowed to use your e-brake, you're not allowed to mess with your tire pressures, you're not allowed to kick the clutch, or you're not allowed to left foot brake.
So I would get rid of tire pressure adjustment at that point.
Okay.
Because now everyone's on the same playing field, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, clutch kicking is going to be based on engine. Turbo cars are going to struggle to make the power on a throttle punch, so you need the clutch kick. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, V8s, they can just gas it and it lights off. Using the e-brake, sometimes you need to float, sometimes you need to slow down behind someone, which you can do with left foot, but everything is kind of a modulation of everything at once. So ultimately, tire pressure would be the least intrusive for me, and I think for a majority of the field, because now you're relying on compound and it not falling apart. If everyone's at the tire spec of 40, or whatever the tire calls out for, everyone's on the same playing field.
Yeah. I think what inspired this is because sometimes I watch videos and I'll see people run a skid pad at OSW, and maybe it's just because I didn't learn with an e-brake. When I was learning, I didn't have an e-brake, and I like Noriaro. I like to watch his videos a lot, and he does some high speed entries, and he doesn't use an e-brake either. For me, like I guess sometimes they'll pull like 20, 30 times around the OSW skid pad, and I'm just like, what are you doing? I mean, do you really need to use it that much?
Yeah.
Maybe you do. What do you? I don't know. Throw me nuts.
So I feel like there's a time and place for it. If you're doing a lead run, you very seldomly use the e-brake. If you're doing a lead run, you can use it as just a very slight quick pull to settle the car, kind of make it flat slide instead of kind of closing in the arc. That's where I would use it. If you're chasing behind someone, you can use it to clutch in and throttle in and just kind of float the car and ready to light off again.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a lot of hand movements there, but and yeah, I think people who maybe overly use the e-brake aren't understanding the concept of left foot braking, which if you have a solid lead run in front of you, it's easier to left foot brake behind them because you have a consistent line to follow. But if you have someone that's kind of back and forth on the angle or slowing down or just kind of lifting off throttle where they're not supposed to, you're going to have to check up on e-brake, where if you're on the left foot brake, you could just basically skid the front tires and still run into them. So I think e-brake is a necessity, but it should not be overused.
Yeah.
I think all techniques should be used at once, and that should be like the idea for all drivers in my head would be to be able to use all of the tools available to you and not just only use one. That's like using a hammer for everything.
Well, I mean, you could do that.
Or everything is a hammer.
Yeah. I mean, I'll wash my windows with a hammer. Watch, you watch me.
Yes.
All right. So anyways, they're I don't know. They don't have words. They don't know how to use.
I'm still trying to get.
What's your biggest memory of Randy Noah?
Biggest memory? Just riding along with him at PBIR.
Oh. Okay.
And this was back when he had the RB20, and he's like, I've been trying out some things. I'm like, okay, all right, let's see how this goes. And then he's just, after the big sweeper on turn 10, he's like, look, no more power. No more power. This has been telling me like I've been needing an engine swap for like years now. No more power. Can't go any faster. Look, there's no more power. I'm like, okay, I think you should stop at some point. It's like, but I'm telling you, there's no more power. Pay attention. I'm like, okay, I get it. Can you study? He's like, all right, hold on. And then he does the thing, and I'm like, this guy's a lunatic. Like, somebody give him a new engine for crying out loud already. But yeah, that was perhaps one of my biggest memories, my fondest memories of him. But yeah, other than that,
yeah, I remember that. I remember that. That was a good time. We were probably going like, I think the RB was capable of going like 80 to 90 down that little straight. And that's when we were like clutch kick entering. So swinging right, swinging left.
Yeah.
And Ben was just like, we're all going for the ride.
Are you gonna fly? Are you gonna try? Are you gonna try to do any of the U.S. Drift Circuit Pro-Am stuff over here? Or are you just gonna?
I would probably, honestly, at the moment, aim for a like a 50K shootout before I aim for U.S. Drift Circuit right now, because of the fact that even if I got a license, which is not feasible now because it's so far into the series, but even if I got a license, I wouldn't be ready to use it. So a 50K shootout like Link ECUs would make more sense to me.
I mean, do you have an event planned that you're going to be doing soon?
This year, not at the moment, but conditions could change. You know, we have the ability to. We have the truck and the trailer and all that stuff, but it's just kind of a financial thing now. Obviously, going to these competitions, you need a lot of tires, so that's one of the biggest expenses. So it's just kind of making do with what we have right now. So the local stuff to get good media and good driving content is just kind of what we're aiming for at the moment, or what I'm trying to do at the moment. That way we can stay current with what's going on and also like keep the car kind of out there.
Looking back at Klutch Kickers, I remember asking you what was wrong with the car, because I would see it being worked on, and then you mentioned how you were having issues with half shafts. Did you ever end up figuring out like a solution for that, or did you just kind of roll with it and kind of see what you could figure out along the way, I guess?
So I can give you a whole series of how it started from start to finish on all the problems we had on the car. If you want me to do that.
Well, it's got to be faster than taking off the bolt from the JZ. So.
Oh man, you're really gonna poke that fun out.
He knows. I mean, that was a painful experience, but it can't be any longer than that.
The bolt came out fine. It was just getting the
pulley off. Yeah, getting the crank pulley off. Yeah,
getting the pulley off. Oh my god,
that was like a viral video for you, huh?
3 or 4 days. And it's viral among our community. That's what's funny. It's like, it's not like everyone knows about it. It's like all of my friends and all of my followers who like I know are like, hey, look at this pulley. I'll touch base on it. I had a pulley that would not come off the engine. Spent 3 days. I ended up having to cut it off. I used hydraulic pullers, fire, everything that I could. It would not come off. Had to use a had to use a cutoff wheel, cut it off. Finally came off in like 14 pieces.
That was the most like
I documented that on my Instagram.
Yeah, no, it's one of the best. It's like one of the best mechanic stories that I've ever seen. Like if you haven't seen it, you gotta go to Randy's Instagram and check. He's got it pinned up there, and just watch the different segments.
You can feel the frustration. Like you could we've
everybody's been there. Everybody's been there.
Whether it's the crank pulley or.
I mean, did you ever stop to consider just getting another engine?
Honestly, I considered putting it back together and just running it as it was. The front main seal was leaking. But I was like, you can just put more oil in it. It's fine. yeah. And then it started coming off in pieces. And then there's no turning back.
Well, let's circle back to the E46 and half shaft issues or whatever.
E46. First round, everything was pretty good. That was our first time driving the car. The only issue we had was the car was kind of sluggish because we didn't have the variable timing and we didn't have nitrous. So the second round we came out, we had nitrous. With that nitrous, that was when we started blowing up axles. The power started to come in pretty smooth, and then the nitrous would hit, and it started breaking axles. So we kind of built like a conservative, like financial side to it. So we were running 330i axles, which are not strong at all. 330i axles and 330i differential. We went through 4 axles in that one
Ooh.
weekend,
Jeez.
Okay.
and 1 half stub or whatever from the differential.
Mhm.
Third event, we went out. We had the nitrous, and we had an M3 rear end. So stronger axles, stronger differential, everything was good. The third event, I was driving, and the M3 rear end is kind of a lower gear ratio, so it's very long. So the power that was hitting was very slow to like kind of reach its peak because the wheel speed needs to ramp up. And during this time was the time that we had the engine that still had low oil pressure.
Mhm.
So with the low oil pressure and the high load, we ended up basically eating through the bearings and ended up getting like a rod.
Mhm.
So that was the end of that third event. Fourth event was when everything was squared away. We had a new engine. We had the M3 rear end on. We had nitrous. We had VVTi now. So we took the car to the dyno with Freddie. Freddie, his first time working with this engine. He's been there from the start with us, and we kind of figured this engine out and what it likes and how much fuel and kind of the setup that it likes, and everything was solid. So we had this engine making the power that nitrous was adding before with just variable timing. And then we added nitrous on top of it. So instead of making like 450 or 500, now we're making 650 and, around that range. So the nitrous was just kind of like a spooler at that point with just the VTI kind of taking over. So the engine was very dialed with the proper oil pressure and all that stuff. So we were ready for this fourth round. And then it got canceled.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, yeah.
Yeah, that's a shame. Don't know what the future holds. A lot of rumors around there. I guess time will tell.
Yeah, it was unfortunate for everyone. So it is what it is. It was just kind of a bummer to end the series that way, but we'll come out at some point and really put it to use.
What rear end did you end up going with? An aftermarket or some sort of OEM upgraded part?
I think M3, right?
So it's an M3.
So it's just a stock
Full M3 rear end.
stock rear M3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. One of our buddies that is part of the crew, we all kind of came together and got that at the time because he's going to end up using it after we're done with it because we're going to go with the 8.8.
Oh, that's what Tim.
So
that's what Tim did.
That's like in the future.
Yeah, that's what I have in my car. That seems legit makes the full kit, the full swap kit. So I have this,
but we're capable of doing it too.
Yeah, I had Jackson fitted the rear end, so we'll see how that works out. But I have I have the Seam Legit axles though, so I should be good on the Seam Legit axles.
Yeah.
I'm still paying them off. I financed them, but we'll see how that works out. But yeah, Seams Legit makes the whole rear end swap. It's pricey, but
we were gonna do that, but at that time, everything was back ordered by like 3 or 4 months, and this was between rounds. So we were like, oh, we got to do a change, get four axles in one weekend. Like, all right, let me get the axles, let me get the differential. Couldn't get it from anywhere. So we ended up doing the M3 because it was a direct drop.
Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah.
Interesting. I wanted to mention how you got to take the opportunity to attend Fuel Fest, Drive Fuel Fest. And what's unique about your experience from what I witnessed is that it's not only you driving your car, but then also seeing somebody else driving what's also part of your car as well, because you shared this build together with Charles, right?
Yeah, Charles.
With the BMW. So, but you were also using the BMW for Klutch Kickers, and you've had to share things. So it's like,
so there's Randy. Oh wait, that's not Randy.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think one of the questions that comes to mind when seeing it is that, does it make it easier for you to tandem because you're familiar with the car inside and out. Like you already know like how it reacts, how it behaves, the power band and everything. So is it easier for you to tandem with it, or is it still sort of a bit of a learning curve because you're having to kind of like work from the driving that Charles is doing?
So ultimately, it's going to be the driver behind the wheel that's going to determine how I tandem. The car itself is mechanically sound and good, and everything was solid. The only problem was I didn't get to drive the car after we made a lot of changes for the last round that we didn't drive. So Charles had never driven the car prior to that. He had done a couple pulls up and down the road, and then Fuel Fest was his first outing on the car. And from lap one, he was killing it. You know what I mean? Like, he hasn't driven in years. And first lap out, he's linking the track. He's throwing down wide open throttle. He has a little bit of modulation on the throttle that I need to fix. I just need to stay flat foot about the entire time. But yeah, I think honestly, if we would have had more laps together, that would have been, you would have seen closer tandems and more kind of aggressive driving. At least from my side, Charles is kind of building up to that confidence in a chase aspect, but he still chased me, but some air gap. But yeah, that event was interesting for the 240 that time too.
Was it strange going back into the 240 because prior to that it was just all the BMW, right?
Yeah, for the year before it was the BMW. I can't remember if I did any small events with the 240, but like I said earlier, I took a lot of the 240 and improvements that I want to do to the 240 and applied it to the BMW. One of the issues that I have with the 240 is the steering is very inconsistent. Kind of like the pressure modulates too much. So it's either really stiff or like pretty smooth. And I've just realized that I've driven through that for a very long time.
Yeah.
So when I went back to the 240, the first lap out, the differential blew up. I was like, okay, great. And it wasn't even on the turn or anything. It was like on the run up. So I was like, okay, here's my chance. First gear, differential blows up. I'm like, so we spent a couple hours fixing it. But on the first lap that I actually got to complete through the track, it was weird because the steering felt light. I was expecting it to be heavy. And then it felt heavy, and I was expecting it to stay somewhat consistent. And during this entire time that I haven't driven from the last Klutch Kickers to Fuel Fest, I had been driving on the sim, which is like the perfect world.
Yeah.
So at one point, I was like, I don't even know what's going on anymore, but it slowly like started to make more sense, just the feel of the steering again. But yeah, it feels weird jumping from seat to seat only because the 240 has inconsistencies that I need to fix.
Do you think? I think I noticed that with I think front rack cars, and then the E46 is a front rack, right? So, and the E30 was a front rack. I felt like going from the E30 that I used to drive now to the G35. The G35 is very much that way as well. It's smooth at some points and then just hard at other points because it's rear rack. It's got to be because it's rear rack, I assume. The front racks seem much smoother. At least that's my experience.
When you say front and rear rack, like are you talking about like the positioning?
Positioning between the center point of the front axle. So a lot of the Nissans are all, the rack is behind the front wheels.
Oh, okay, I get you.
And the BMWs have the rack in front of the front wheels. The newest Wise Fab kit for the 240s actually moves it in front.
Oh.
So they redo all the geometry to move your tie rod point to the front of the knuckle instead of the back, which I guess makes the steering smoother. I don't know if you heard. Do you have anybody that know anybody that has it?
There's a couple of people that have it. I don't know if it's only because of that, because I've seen rear rack setups function properly. I think honestly it's my power steering pump and just a mix of an old rack, an old tired rack. That's
it could be that.
Maybe losing pressure in some, especially at some of these locks. So I have the FDF angle kit on my car, and when you get to lock, you start putting a lot of pressure and loads on the steering rack, and if it's old and tired, I'm sure it's going to start, seeping out or leaking the pressure out, and then the pump is going to be struggling as well. So the BMW, we have electric power steering, so it's a consistent pressure, and it's just whatever varying load. So I'm not 100% sure if just the positioning makes a difference, but I do know that we try and move our steering rack as far forward as possible, which I did on the 240, just because of the fact that the offset rack spacers kill the rack a lot faster because of the side loads that you get on it. And it's just better to have just direct input to the steering rack and as straight as possible. So I think on the forward side, you're clearing a lot of the what do you have to do? So with a JZ, you have to run a rear sump if you want that front mount steering rack on the 240.
Well, I had to do it on the E46 too.
Well, yeah, because E46 is rear sump.
Yeah.
So you're already there, but
yeah, I don't know. I noticed the difference because I have the WiseFab kit that moves your rack forward on my G35. So I have all that, and the only difference between the two cars, because they both were power steering pumps. The only difference I noticed, the only difference that is the actual feel. But then again, I know people that say they have their like Gabriel says his steering is smooth, but he also runs like 9 degrees of caster.
Yeah, a lot of caster. I think the other reason for moving it forward that far is because of the fact that you can use a BMW rack. What I understand on the
Oh, really?
kit
Okay, that's nice.
for the 240. Yeah, I believe so. I think there's an adapter and all that stuff where you can run it in front. I think that was another purpose that exists, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know why they moved it all the way to the front, though.
Whatever happened to manual racks? They were all the rage back in the day, and now it's like long forgotten. No one's talking
Everybody
about
wants
it.
electric
Nobody's
power
mentioning
steering.
it. No one's advocating for it. I mean, it's not even in the lexicon of everyone's vocabulary anymore. Everyone's all about WiseFab this, angle kit that, put the rack somewhere here and over there, because now
hide the rack in the back. Where's going to be rear mounted rack?
Yes, exactly. Steering by wire.
Steering by wire.
What's going on?
Yeah.
I
think one of the big differences is, you have a steering wheel that's like this with power assisted versus a steering wheel that's like this on a manual.
Yeah, right. Yeah, a freaking semi truck wheel.
Yeah.
Or you have the trade off of 300 turns to make the half turn that it takes with power steering. So I think all of it comes into play, where you want to make small adjustments versus small adjustments.
Some people do that anyways.
Yeah. That is true.
That's funny.
When you go out to these events, do you still kind of like ask yourself, oh, I could really help that person out? Or do you just be like, well, he looks like he's having a party inside the car.
Let's leave him alone. Just leave him alone.
I did do a couple of the instructor days at OSW, and those are the situations where people are like openly, putting it out there that they want to learn, and that's why they have the instructor. I try not to tell people like, hey, you should be, adjusting this if they don't want to hear it. If they're doing their own thing, go for it. It just looks a little crazy sometimes. But if I'm like, hey, how you doing? They're like, hey man, I can't figure this out, and they want to learn, then I'll like 100%, share knowledge or like what they should focus on or just little details.
Have you ever thought about like getting on a pro team as far as like helping out or doing anything with a program in order to kind of build that knowledge? Because a lot of people we talk to do that have kind of built their way up. Like I think Jonathan Nairnin did that, and there was a couple other people.
Brandon McDowell.
Brandon McDowell as well.
Yeah.
So that's something you ever thought about?
So I've actually started that process. I'm helping Bill Mitchell.
Oh,
Billy Mitchell.
awesome! Yeah, we interviewed Billy Mitchell a while ago.
Yeah. So he is getting into the more competitive side of driving now and starting to drive like 50K shootouts. He was going to do the U.S. Drift Circuit, but didn't end up making that event. But I went to the 50K shootout with him this last round, and so I was a mechanic, and we had another mechanic with us, and Freddie, who's the tuner for the car, who also has a vast amount of knowledge in the Formula Drift side of things because he's been around it for so long. So it's just been kind of a learning experience altogether, just kind of how much it takes to be competitive,
Yeah,
how much financial strain it takes to be competitive.
exactly.
And just, I mean, it's always a learning experience, but I'm really grateful to be able to be a part of it. So yeah, I've been slowly kind of getting into that side, and now because of my flight benefits and all that stuff, it's more feasible for me to go to these random places and just go for the weekend and help out and do whatever.
That's cool. That's awesome. Billy's a good guy.
Yeah, Billy's a good guy, and he's came out on like out of nowhere. He started getting into the Klutch Kickers, and just right away we could see that. And even a couple times I saw him in some of the U.S. Drift Circuit practice events, and he just seems like he's taken very naturally to it, even the competition side. But he comes from a racing background, so he was able to utilize that.
Yeah.
Did you ever before drifting? Did you ever do any type of competition sports at all, like motocross or anything?
No, my introduction to drifting was the only motorsport that I really did. It was like drifting.
Yeah, like a lot of us.
Yeah, a lot of Florida people. That's how we all got into this, was all through drifting.
Yeah. Have you been going to drift events over there in Texas at all?
Honestly, no. It's kind of like one of those, you don't want to go to the events when you don't have your car because you feel weird.
Yeah, no.
I know that feeling.
Like so Dallas is a good center for drifting. So you have Lone Star Drifting, and you have a calendar that basically has like a 4-hour radius of events that you can go to. And I've looked at them, but I never went to them. I've been following Formula Drift around, so I've gone to every round this year so far. And I think I might try and go to Houston for like one of the fun events that they have down there, just to go hang out, because I've just been in my apartment. Not really. I've been traveling around, so I'm just kind of just going everywhere I can.
Do you see a future where you bring your car over to Texas? I mean, does Texas seem like it's going to be a permanent place for Mr. Randy?
So Mr. Randy is thinking about it.
Okay.
It's initially, this was me figuring out kind of, is this a position that I'm going to enjoy? And it's turning out to be a yes, and a position that I can grow in was a really big question for me. And that's another question that was answered as yes. Okay. So with those two being yes, and because of Texas being so vast, there's a lot of opportunity for you to be able to find land and a house and all that stuff with the reasonable price range compared to Florida, where Florida was,
yeah,
it's a peninsula. You're getting pushed up all along the edges of where the cities are populated, and everything's just pushing up. Florida, Palm Beach is what Fort Lauderdale was. Now, Port St. Lucie is what Palm Beach was. It's just all pushing up, so it's getting harder for me to envision a future staying in Florida, where it's in the same South Florida area. And because of my job, it's based here in Dallas. This is ultimately where I would like to end my career. So it's kind of just going to be in Dallas. So likely, yes, I will be staying here for good. But my end goal is to have a house with a shop space and have my tools and car and just kind of go off of that.
All right. So as far as the Breathe Free, is that you're still going along with doing that, the whole thing?
Yeah. So a long time ago, I never caged a 240 because I didn't want to cage it and make it a car that was at risk of, tandem and crashing and all that stuff. Then I started easing into it. Going into Klutch Kickers was like, okay, driving more serious now, doing all this, but I didn't need a cage, so everything was still good. And then next round of Klutch Kickers came out. That's why the BMW really started. So I didn't want to put the 240 at risk, but now it's gotten to the point where I can't drive the 240 in most of these places without a cage because of the insurance and because of other regulations. So now it's turning into, or I can't even bring a passenger if I don't have a cage. So now it's turning into, I want the 240 to remain as its intended purpose of bringing awareness and being able to do expos and kind of ride-alongs and fundraisers and all that stuff. So I'm going to try and cage it at some point and rewire the entire car. So Breathe Free is never going anywhere. That's kind of who I am and who I have tried to build for so long. Not just me, but kind of my purpose is what I'm chasing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's never going to end. I'm in fact trying to do the virtual side of things now because obviously my situation is different now. I'm more readily available on PC stuff, so a set of courses has been my normal place now. And yeah,
all right,
starting to try and push into that side of things.
Good deal. Well, we've kind of kept you quite a while, even though we've only been talking on the show for about an hour. We've had you probably for about a little over 2.5 hours. So I'm going to go and let you go.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. We ended up getting figured out. But thank you so much for your time, Randy. I really appreciate just being able to watch you develop as a driver and do some crazy stuff. And then watching you, like I said, still my favorite battle of all time was that Klutch Kickers battle between you and Alec. So we look forward to more memories, right? Maybe just online right now, but hopefully next season we'll see you back behind the wheel and getting back into competition. Ben, you have something?
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that just every time that when we were at Klutch Kickers, we're like either with the camera or just going around with it, and Randy would just go out of his way to jump in. It was like, as crazy as it was, we always enjoyed it. That he was pop in and kind of give us an update as to what's going on, even though he was quick to the point and wouldn't really elaborate with things, but still, it was still that's Randy that we love.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us, Randy. And like I said, look forward to next time we're out in Texas. Maybe we'll see you at LS Fest next year.
Yeah.
You can come out and say hello and hang out.
Yeah, well, I'll be back in Florida a couple times this year.
Hit us up.
I'll see you
Sounds
guys.
like a plan.
Yeah.
All right, Randy. Thank you so much,
boys.
man. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye.